Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you ever come from. I am Royan Hafidan. I'll be moderating this amazing webinar with you today. I'm a campus director of Zaytuna University in Libya. I fellow with you in 2025 short. And today's webinar, it will be an hour, including Q&A sessions, and we will have a question. You can ask questions later on the chat. First of all, I'll be welcoming our amazing guest for today. And now I'm thrilled to introduce our first guest, which is my pleasure to introduce you, Camille Bangug. Camille works at the Cross Board of Social Impact and Climate Innovation. She leads ecosite partnerships at Elemental Impact, collaborating with investors, startups, and corporates and mission-driven organizations to accelerate financing stage climate tech solutions at Deloitte's innovations arm. Outside her day-to-day work, Camille serves at the board of campus directors at the Millennium Campus Network, and she was a campus director for 2018 Millennium Fellowship class at Georgetown University. Camille, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rayon. It is so lovely to be here. Oh my goodness. This program is so near and dear to my heart. And I am just so privileged to be able to join all of you and thank all of you for being a part of MCN. I was spending some time this morning thinking about what is it that I should say to this group at a time like this. And I was reflecting on the theme that you all have for your fellowship this year, the power we hold, and the significance of that word we in particular. It is something that resonates so deeply with me for my journey during my time at MCN and beyond. And so today I figured I would give you a little bit of like a blast from the past, talk to you about how it is that I got here from my journey with MCN during my time as an undergraduate and then beyond, and how that collective power has really held true and honestly kept me accountable and kept me sticking to what it is that the change that I know that we all are working so hard to affect in our communities today. So I'll start first with how I got to MCN, which is a story that begins 10 years ago, dating myself here, but I started engaging with MCN when I was in high school. When I was a senior, I was invited to join the Millennium Campus Conference to join other youth that are working around the world on what were at the time called the Millennium Development Goals. And it was the first time that many of the challenges and the problems that I was working with in my community, in my classroom, I realized that those discussions were much bigger than myself. I was just one voice in a larger, greater global dialogue that I realized for the first time was being led by young people. And it was the first time truly that I think Sam gave this gift of the collective we and the power that that group holds when we are able to join together to activate on our work and to share what we're learning and celebrate each other and uplift each other. So having that word we, I remember I went to campus my freshman year. I went to school in Washington, D.C., which is where I live and work now. And I remember that Sam came and visited me on campus and he was asking me about my time with MCN at the conference. And I was like, Sam, whatever it is that you build to make this community bigger, this collective we stronger, I want to be a part of it. I don't know where that leads in the next few years of my time at undergraduate, but I will take my time to build the social impact toolkit that I've been hoping to build at university. And then you let me know when it's time to arrive and be a part of that collective we. So Sam took that and spent some time developing what would become the Millennium Fellowship. But at the time, I took some time to work within my classes, within my extracurriculars, and then with a couple of really impactful external fellowships to better understand what are the problems that I care about most, and what is my one voice in this collective we, in this collective dialogue. It was then that I was able to do a really important fellowship in my undergraduate career in my family's home country of the Philippines. And shout out to anybody if they're calling from there today. But I was able to work at an ecotourism resort with a whole host of Filipino environmentalists who created a model that not only underpinned financial sustainability. It was a for-profit business model, but they found a way to develop this model so that it was in service of conservation of the beautiful coral reefs and the biodiversity hotspot of that area in the Philippines. And it was from them that I learned everything. I learned not only the basics of climate change science and also how that was impacting many of these gorgeous coral reefs that so many people flocked to visit, but I also learned that building systems like this had to happen in hand with local communities. They prioritized community dialogues. They prioritized engaging with local government and finding ways to uplift Indigenous conservation practices as part of their business model. And seeing that work hand in hand, I realized this is what I hope to do with the rest of my life, is how do we redesign these systems so that we have micro versions and macro versions of these systems everywhere, addressing and keeping us from feeling the worst effects of a changing climate. And so that experiential learning program happened. Sam comes back to me my senior year and says, hey, there's an opportunity here. I think we might have something to do a more formal program where we can take this collective we and start to share many of the things that all of you are learning on campus and doing in your campus communities and beyond. So when Sam offered me the ability to apply as a campus director, I jumped on the opportunity and I was able to spend my whole MCN project figuring out how do we design more experiential learning programs for students on my campus and beyond to learn about these social impact toolkits that are being developed across the globe. And then beyond that, after my senior year, I was so privileged to be able to graduate from the fellowship program and from university. But the collective we did not leave. In fact, it may have gotten much stronger as I left. And as you cut into the noise of your undergraduate experience and go into the rest of the world, how do you hold on to that collective dialogue and make sure that your voice is continuing to contribute to this conversation? And it really was the community of individuals that I met through my fellowship who continued to push me to say, figure out how to do this full time. We see this in you and we want you to keep doing that. And so it was through their continued encouragement and commiseration sometimes, and continued accountability that I was able to really just say in my next job, where I ended up working in the private sector, that I want to work on climate innovation. It is what I feel like my calling is. It is where I see the biggest potential impact for myself and my career. And so I was able to pivot doing just that. I spent 3 years doing climate innovation at Deloitte after doing a year in management consulting. And then beyond that, I was able to volunteer with a couple of extracurriculars, so to speak, volunteering with different newsletters that were writing about climate innovation at the time. I helped develop on-campus programming for high school students who were trying to figure out what it is, sustainability is, and how do you bring that into your communities. And then I was able to take all those experiences and continued accountability from Sam, from others in this community to translate into my current work, which I now work with an organization that we full-time identify, invest in, and figure out how to deploy and scale many of these technologies that will help us mitigate the worst impacts of a changing climate. I'm also so grateful to MCN because around that time that I got this new job and started working more formally in this sector, Sam had asked me to be a part of the board of directors of MCN, which is a huge honor. And over a decade of MCN changing my life at a variety of moments, I feel like a true testament to the power of the collective we and the power that we all hold. So I just want to say an enormous thank you to each of you for taking time to be a part of this collective. It is not just this semester in your life that this will impact your work. This is a lifelong commitment to a community of individuals who are as equally committed to seeing a future through that is more just, more sustainable, more equitable for each of us. So I'm deeply grateful to MCN, to you and Academic Impact for continuing this, and so excited for this conversation today. Rayan, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Camille, for sharing. You were so inspiring, and I'm sure we all proud of you. Wish to be like you someday. So now heading for our next speaker. Our next speaker is, sorry. Okay, just face the glitch. So next you are excited to welcome Richard Ling. Richard Ling is currently on the GTM team at George, the world's leading AI interface platform. Prior to George, he spent 4 years working on the clean tech industry, where he enabled hundreds of megawatts of solar energy to be installed at 500 companies and government agents. Richard graduated from Penn Engineering and previously founded 2 companies, One existed during his time at Pennsylvania. He also started the university first MCN short. Richard, thank you for being here. Please feel free to introduce yourself and share your journey.
Thanks, Rayan. And thank you all. I think I just want to take a moment and acknowledge how cool this is to hop on a Zoom call and be with like hundreds of people from different countries. I don't think this will ever happen in your lifetime ever again. So it's a privilege to be here, and thank you all for welcoming me. I don't know where you guys are all calling in from, but I am probably in a much more boring place. I'm in Northern Virginia right now, actually somewhat close to Camille. Um, and my story, what I want to just share here briefly is when you talk about the theme of this year, which Camille touched on, the power we hold here. I think the most visceral moment that I had, just realizing this was when I first joined MCN, which was way back in 2018. I was a sophomore or junior in college at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I was an engineering student. And I saw this random thing pop up of MCN was accepting fellowships, and they wanted a campus director. I had no idea what it was, and it was the first ever cohort, but I was instantly hooked on it and thought I would apply. The only problem was I was the only person to apply at the time. It was 4 days before the deadline, and we had one applicant, and it was me. So the problem was that we needed at least 8 applicants. And so basically, what I did was I didn't want us to not do this as a campus because I knew there were so many people within the university that were interested. So what I did was I cold emailed every single student that I knew, every single professor that I knew, and try to just spread the word that you guys should apply to this. And ultimately, in the span of 3 days, we went from one student to 28 students, and we got accepted as the first ever kind of MCM cohort. The beauty of that story is that it's not just like the numbers of getting these people, but the projects that we did wouldn't have happened unless, essentially we all came together and said we wanted to do this. And so what I want to highlight is not my own project, but the other projects that were, I think, much cooler. So we had one MCN fellow who actually directed an Oscar winning documentary called Period End of Sentence. And she went on to not only win the Oscar, but become a full-time film director, focusing on social impact movies and narratives. And that all started kind of during that MCN fellowship. So it's kind of that seed that planted that whole tree. And you guys might reflect on this with your own project. Think about what you're doing today in this fellowship, and think about how do I actually make it something I can do not just when this ends, but many, many years thereafter. That's the lens in which you should think about these things, because you're not going to make a giant social impact in 1 year. You're going to make it in decades, or throughout your lifetime. And that's something to really think about. The other project that was really cool is we had a woman build an app that actually helped refugees acclimate to the US environment and really find the resources they need. That was really awesome because she actually took that on and helped dozens of refugees within the Philadelphia ecosystem and continued to do so after she graduated. So there's this theme that happened that was very special in my first cohort, where the people that were in it weren't in it just for the resume, weren't in it just for one flash in the pan and just stop doing it. They were in it to start a project that they wanted to carry on throughout their life. And that's something we should not lose as MCN fellows. I don't know. It's been many years since, obviously, you guys are class of 2025, I believe. So much younger than myself. But what you have to hold is this program, which is unique from any other program I've been in, gives you the power to dream. And this is something that as adults is very easy to lose. When you get the kind of day to day coming on after you graduate, you enter into the real world where you have to make a paycheck, you have to support potentially a family if you guys want to do that eventually, all these things that complicate life. And you often lose the power to dream. And I think this program is a unique place where you can do that. But it's only impactful insofar as you can carry that after you graduate. So after I graduated from this program, what I was really focused on was renewable energy. I actually was passionate about renewable energy ever since I was like a sophomore in high school and knew I wanted to do that. So my program at Penn was strictly focused on renewable energy research. So after graduating from Penn, I jumped straight, head on into the renewable energy industry and basically helped a bunch of government agencies like NREL, the Air Force, Navy in the US build a bunch of solar and microgrid plants to power their operations sustainably. And this was well before renewable energy was like a political issue. It was basically a logical point to me where why wouldn't we want energy that is sustainable, that is self replenishing? I thought that was just the coolest thing ever. So I did that for about 4 or 5 years. And then now I'm working in the AI space at a company called Grok, not to be confused with the other Grok run by Mr. Elon Musk. But our Grok is one of the leading AI infrastructure companies. And I did this because with energy and AI, I think they are inextricably linked in the sense of the fuel of all AI, which has been dominating a bunch of discourse these days, is energy. And so I thought, after we solve this energy problem, what do we do with that energy to actually make it useful to this world? And I think AI is one of those issues where it can either be the absolute greatest thing to happen to the world, or it could result in many negative effects, much like social media did. Back when social media first spawned, it was growing like wildfire, and we weren't sure whether it would be a net positive or negative to the society. And I think AI is in that precipice moment as well. So I really wanted to be in an industry like that. So I would encourage you, like, my journey is quite, all over the place and unique, but the guiding line throughout this is how do we actually make an impact to society, not be complacent and settle for careers or, things that you do after college that are just, giving a paycheck and you come home and you repeat, I don't think that's the life that any of us want here. We want to actually make an impact in the world and make that our actual career. So make sure that when you think about your project you're doing today, see how it can actually be sustainable. And maybe you won't work on this exact project after you graduate, but how can you carry that theme throughout your life and truly make an impact, not just now, but decades into the future? So thank you guys for having me again. Really an honor to be here. Really excited to hear your questions. And Rayan, I pass it back to you.
Thank you, Richard, for sharing that with us. It was so inspiring when you mentioned how important is it to dream, because life without dreaming is nothing. And to make this a better future, we should start by dreaming big. Thank you so much, Richard. I want to remind all the fellows to put their questions for Richard and Camille in the chat. You can as well raise your hand and we'll have you unmuted to ask your questions directly to Richard and Camille. But I have questions for Richard and Camille myself. My first question go to Richard. So, Richard, the Millennium Fellowship connects thousands of students globally. From your experience, what makes a social impact project truly sustainable? Something that continues to create value beyond the fellowship?
Yeah, it's a great question. So this is really dependent on what specifically you're doing with that project, but I'll try to answer it in like a general sense. So I would say, like, when you think about making a sustainable project, I've seen so many, amazing nonprofits and projects throughout my lifetime that were extremely noble missions, but fizzled out. And that's like the saddest thing in the world because you never want to see something that had a really noble mission, a really great cause kind of just die. So the question is, how do you make something not die? And so when you think about a sustainable social impact enterprise here, it could just be a project you do that, is sustainable because you have the time to do it. You do it, let's say, after, after work or stuff. And, I've seen those kind of projects actually be quite sustainable because it's like a hobby you do, a little side project. That is one version of it. Then there is a larger version where you make it into your actual career. So back in my day, I founded two nonprofits and really tried to pursue this mission because I thought that if I founded a nonprofit that actually spearheaded a mission, got the adequate funding for it, and sustainably did that, that is one way to do it. The only thing, if you do that route, is you have to make sure that you have a truly sustainable source of funding for that nonprofit. I chose the route of fundraising from large corporate entities that had social impact goals. And I literally was like some random teenager at the time, just like going into their headquarters office, trying to, get money from them to run my social impact project, which is quite an experience. Would recommend it if you're interested in that world. But the thing about that is a lot of nonprofits follow this 80-20 rule, where 20% of them are actually doing quite well because they're getting the vast majority of grants from governments, from corporate entities, but then 80% of them are actually struggling a lot. And they're struggling to get funding, they're struggling to stay afloat. It's a very, very tough world. So I would say if you pursue that route and try to make your enterprise sustainable that way, make sure that you have a strong way to actually sustainably raise funding, and deploy that funding towards the mission and not just towards administration, which is a key struggle with nonprofits these days. And then the final way is to actually do it via a for-profit mechanism. You've seen this kind of realm of like for-profit social enterprises that actually make money from what they do, that it actually gets a good social impact. That is a very interesting one because it is sustainable by definition. Every time you make money, you can actually generate a proportional impact. I find that really compelling as well. And so, like, when you think about how your project is segmented, try to bucket it into one of those three. Either it's like a side project that you do sustainably, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It could be a nonprofit enterprise, it could be a for-profit enterprise, but really try to dial in what is it that you're trying to do here, and how can you make it sustainable and do throughout your lifetime.
Thank you, Richard. That was so important. And I was like waiting for this answer myself. And yes, sometimes we need funding for the project to still be alive. Thank you so much, Richard. I'll head to the next question. My next question will be for you, Camille. So, Camille, building partnership can be daunting. How can young leaders ensure their relationship with founders and stakeholders truly affect the community needs?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time doing partnerships work. It is my formal job title. And what that means, honestly, is trying to translate common goals between a lot of different folks. And the most important thing to understand that when you're bringing diverse stakeholders into an issue area that is affecting your local community is that there are going to be lots of latent dynamics at play. And maybe those are power dynamics. They could be, conversations that are communities who have been harmed by actions of other stakeholders that are involved in this issue, or may have been complicit in some of the other issues that you're trying to solve for. And so as somebody that serves as a partnership builder, your job is to be a facilitator. And something I learned this past year from many of my other mentors who work on problems like this is that as a facilitator, you're responsible for the creation of culture. We say culture and we think about, our cultural identities in the communities that we're a part of, in our countries, or even smaller, in our families. But culture is also a standard that you can uphold in these partnership interactions. When you're bringing different groups of people together, you have to identify what are the base level principles that will allow everybody to show up and know that they will be respected in that space. And as a facilitator, your job is to translate many of those tensions and call them out to try to figure out how do you translate a common goal among these individuals and ensure that everybody feels they're in a safe and protected space where they can voice these concerns and be met with conversations around solutions and dialogue rather than flashpoints. And there are always places for folks to voice questions of concern, to voice many of those tensions that we feel in doing social impact work. Much of this is all very personal. And so it's important to give folks venues to do those things. But as a facilitator, your job is to make sure that when those things are voiced, you're not creating a situation where those are just being shot out into the ether, but rather part of a productive discussion. So in ensuring that you're bringing all these different folks to the table, think of that first. What would respect mean for each of these stakeholders? And does it look different for other folks? In the Philippines, for example, even in folks who live outside of the country, there's huge respect for our elders. And that is so much of how we govern our interactions with folks, not only in our personal lives, but in the workplace. And as you're thinking about the approaches that you might build, the partners you bring to the table, figure out what those dynamics are. As a facilitator, take time to prepare so that you're able to facilitate that. And then I will always say this, practice the language of facilitation before you go into the room. If you anticipate that there's going to be tensions and somebody else is going to have to be told to quiet down a little bit, practice what you might say to invite that. Or if you feel like you might get contradicting perspectives, what might you say to allow those people to approach this with dialogue rather than feeling like they're attacking each other? So as facilitators, remember you're responsible for culture, and that is such a key component that underpins successful partnerships is shared respect and shared respect for the culture you're bringing.
Thank you, Camille. That was so useful. I loved how you mentioned to to respect others and to make this a comfortable place to everyone. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for this amazing advice. Now I'll head for my second question for Richard. Richard, my question is for you. We often hear the phrase tech for good. So what's your advice for making tech-driven solution inclusive, equitable, and accessible?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say there's a lot of tech that is not strictly for good. The reality in life is like most tech companies these days, obviously, like their foremost mission in the world is to drive capital returns. And that is the reality we live in here. However, there is this choice that you have to make where you can either just say, I'm going to go with that mission and I'm just going to generate the, as many shareholder returns as I can, or I'm going to try to do something different where I'm going to actually try to apply tech for actual good. And what does that mean? I would say it depends on what you're trying to do for good here. And so I'll give you my what I'm trying to do right now, and you have to decide what you want to do. So when I think about tech for good, the reason I joined the AI space is that there is this dynamic happening in AI right now where the vast majority of power is being accrued to pretty much four companies. You have obviously Google, OpenAI, Meta, and X. Those are, you can argue maybe Apple and Amazon are kind of lagging behind, but the vast majority of those four companies. Do we want a world where the most powerful technology in the world is aggregated towards just those four companies, or do we want a different world? And in my view, I wanted a different world where we actually supported open source AI LLM models, and everyone, regardless of if they were the wealthiest billionaire or just a regular student, can actually access the most powerful technology in the world. And so that's what my current company does, Grok. We're trying to make sure that AI is democratized towards everyone by making it extremely low cost to run, such that anyone can run it no matter how much money you have, and making it so that you can run it throughout the world globally on the most open source models available. That's what I am currently trying to pursue. But I would encourage for you guys, think about what you are good at, whether it is engineering or linguistics or partnerships or like whatever it is. And the cool thing about the technology industry is you don't have to necessarily just be good at like engineering and tech, work in it, or to be in that sphere. You can actually do a lot of things in it. But if you know what you're good at and you know what good you're trying to facilitate in this world, you can do that because there's a lot of people who don't have the effort and energy to do that. They just want to make a paycheck, they want to come home, and that's it. So the cool thing about this world is it actually rewards people who are willing to take that risk, who are willing to be different, because people recognize that there's actually not a lot of people like you guys. Like I hope you realize that there's like you guys are quite unique. That once you enter into the real world, it's filled with boring people, and there's not a lot of people who can actually dream and do things that are different. So that's why I want to really emphasize like keep doing that because once you stop, you start being a normal person, and that's very boring. So that's what I would say about tech for good. That's my definition, but you guys should figure out your own.
Thank you so much, Richard. Always love the dreaming part. It really makes life different. And thank you for the insights. I will have my next question to Camille, but before that, I want to remind you all to type your questions in the chat for both Camille and Richard, or you can kindly raise your hand and then we will be back for you. So my question for Camille is that the social impact in climate space can feel nosy and polarized. What are the best practices to tell stories of real community-led change?
Oh yeah, this is a great question, and maybe the heart of so much of the reflection that many organizations like mine have been undergoing for the past year. I think the best advice I can give that has emerged to me in years of tumultuous, and you can see backsliding climate progress. You see some momentum and then it might go away and then it comes again. In a world where there's so many different tides of what progress looks like, and it can be quite polarizing, I really, really value simplicity. And I think simplicity, we take a lot of time, especially in the work of what we call climate innovation, to be very jargony. We love to overcomplicate our work. We love an acronym, a framework, a system change that is given like lots of definitions of how you might term it. But something that we've been challenging ourselves in my organization at MCN and beyond is really to how do you talk about the impact of your work in its simplest form? And I'll call out the work of one organization. It's not climate specific, but I think they do this really beautifully, is World Central Kitchen, which is the nonprofit organization of the famous chef Jose Andres. But the work of them is really that when there is hunger, they go and feed people. And that is a beautiful and simple mission that, to Richard's points earlier about creating sustainability in your movement, those are the kinds of things that no matter what the political headwinds are or what the polarizing dialogue might be, what are the prevailing messages that will allow you to translate that beyond that? And that's where simplicity can be really beautiful. For climate specifically, we always bring it back to the communities that are being impacted by the worst effects of climate change. And that looks like so many different things globally. We always say, for us, when we're thinking about deploying these technologies, it's not about, making sure that this technology reaches this commercialization threshold on this scale with this fun acronym. We bring it back to wanting to be able to breathe air free of pollutants in our communities, to children to be able to sleep in their beds at night without the constant fear of being evacuated by a wildfire or severe flooding that is exacerbated by climate change. We want everyone everywhere to have the lights on so that they can do their homework at night and study or cook dinner for their families or read their favorite books at night. I'm not saying, I think to this point, I'm not saying to not be an expert, because it is important to be well-versed in all of the different acronyms, all the different vocabularies of the problem that you're facing. There is much work that's already been done on many of these problems, and it's important we honor that. And you need that intellectual and programmatic rigor to make sure that these programs are successful. But what I'm asking you is to practice simple translations of your impact. That's how you make it sustainable and make it so that it's not just a handful of people on your campus, the 15 of you that are working on these problems, but rather you're able to build movements. And that's something I think MCN and SAM have done really beautifully, and that I recommend each of you take time to practice and figure out how do you build that simplicity into your sustainable funding models and organizational models.
Thank you so much, Camille, and also mentioning that sometimes finding solutions that are just simple and clear and direct can solve huge problems. So thank you so much for bringing that up. It was so necessary to remind everyone that it's not, you do not have to be expert sometimes to solve world problems. Sometimes it's just that simple. We should just take some actions. Thank you so much, Camille, for that question. Now I will go to our fellows who are raising their hand. Reminder for anyone who wants to raise their hand and ask questions directly to Richard and Camilla. Feel free to do so. My question is for, the mic is for Tasneem. If you want to ask a question for Camilla and Richard. Unmute yourself.
Hi, Camille. Hi, Richard. I'm Tasneem. I'm from Azeitona University. I'm a student there. And my question is for both of you. If you were advising a student starting a social innovation project today, what would be the single most critical step to focus on?
Thank you, Tasneem, for sharing this amazing question. I will have this question for Richard. Would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, Tasneem, I'm assuming you're asking for a project you're working on. Would you mind just sharing like super one sentence, like what is the high level gist of what you're working on?
Well, I'm working on SDG 3, which it's based on health. But I think the point I'm asking for is a point that can lead any project.
Okay, great. Well, great. You're working on that one. That's a tough one, but kudos to you on that. I would say when you think about building your social impact kind of enterprise here, think about first, like to Camille's point, like what is the simplest problem you're solving? Like you should be able to communicate this problem you're solving in very simple terms to even like a parent or like a friend who is completely unaware of it. And if they can care about that, that's a great sign. That's a good first step because now you have validation that it's not just an isolated niche problem that you know a lot about, but actually doesn't resonate with others. This is the first key to any problem you guys are solving because it has to be something that is so simple and obvious to communicate that it just makes sense to others. Because the reality with all of these social kind of impact projects is that they need a collective to actually make an impact. This is very distinct from like some of the things I've done in the startup world, where it's like some random tech product you build and you just kind of get it out there that people don't have to believe in it. But for actual social projects that make an impact on humans, the unique challenge is people have to get behind you and people have to be a part of your movement. So I would say, like, depending on what you're doing, this could matter a lot or it can matter a little bit. In my experience, when I was an MCN fellow, I started a actual like university to university competition where people actually built initiatives that tackled the SDGs, and we actually had a competition that awarded the best projects. And this was very dependent on community because we had to spread the word to a lot of different universities. We had to get people to actually care about this a lot. And so, what I've seen as the common thread for all of these SDG projects is that they require people to care about it, not just you, not just the people in your campus fellowship, but that is the first key. And once you get that, a lot unlocks. You suddenly get doors open to actually fund your project from whether it's corporate entities or government entities. Then they actually start caring about it from that sense. I went from talking to random college students to the Philadelphia government, which actually got behind our project, which was really cool. And then like think about it from that stance of start small, from how do you get one person to care about it, then like a collective people, then like maybe governments care about it. That's actually how Sam at MCN started this. So it's like that's how you should think about your framing. And if you think about it that way, it's actually not that daunting because you start small, you grow bigger and bigger, and it's a snowball effect.
Thank you, Richard, so much for answering this question and bringing out how to start small to reach the big parts of the project. Camille, would you like to add anything?
The only thing I'll add, and I love Richard's response so much because that is, you are each of you movement building. And it is so, I do want to give you each like a huge pat on the back. I know that it's hard sometimes to say it out loud and there is, an admission of how difficult it is to translate these problems into this. And storytelling is such an enormous part of that. So the jobs that you are all taking each on your campus communities to tell those stories are fundamental to this work. And as you're doing the outer external part of this work, it's important to also do a lot of the inner work. And a framework that we use a lot in my current organization is called your ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese word. I will put it in the chat because it's a little hard to spell. But the purpose of ikigai is that there is an intersection for your specific work where you can make an impact. And that looks like the intersection of what you love to do, what you're good at, what the world needs, and then crucially, what you can be paid for. And that's important to just sustain to make sure that you can live your life. As you're going through the rest of your campus journey, building this project and activating others, make sure that it's not only sustainable for the movement, but also sustainable for you. And that involves some really deep reflection. I'm a big journaler. I love writing down my thoughts. And I recommend spending a lot of that inner time because on your campus day to day, it can be hard to find those moments for reflection in the midst of all that's going on, especially with the problems that you're all facing. But it's fundamental to make sure that this movement is not only externally sustainable, but also internally.
Thank you, Camilla, for reminding us for journaling and reflecting on ourselves, taking our time to understand how we can make effect in the world. Tasneem, did that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah, I really like the idea of ikigai. I think I'm gonna use it forever. And thank you so much, Camille and Richard. I think I've never been inspired by something and steps that you two have mentioned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'll give the mic to Abu Talib. Would you like to join us and ask questions for Camille and Richard?
Definitely. Hello, how are you, everyone? Abdurrab, and how are you, How are you, Rahim? Is it so? And how are you, Richard? My question is mainly targeting on the gatekeepers that you might have when we're partaking in these activities on campus. Sometimes we see that when you are intending to do this at this exact time, because we'll be running against the time, we tend to have people or those in the authority to say, no, you cannot do this, or they will delay signing your papers and so forth and so forth. So my question will be directed to both to both to Camila and to Richard.
Abu
But how
Talib,
will
I'm
you
so sorry to interrupt you, but I don't believe your audio is that clear. Can you please higher your voice a little bit?
Or if you type your
Sure,
question in the chat, we can read it too.
Oh, definitely.
For the meantime, would you like to repeat your question again, or would you type it in the chat? Sorry, Abu Talib, it doesn't seem that we can't hear you clearly. Okay. So I will go to Hayek-10th. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. You can ask questions for Richard and Camille.
Thank you, Ryan. It's Hyacinth. Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. And thank you, Richard and Camille, for such a wonderful session so far. Here's my question. I think I will need answers from both of you somehow. Talking about sustainability, how, when a team or when a project has been designed targeting a particular goal, and then during a step in the implementation of that goal, a more important problem that seems to be the root cause of the goal that is being targeted is found. How does one, talking about sustainability, and the solution to that root problem seems not to be very sustainable, at least the solution that the implementing team seems to have is not sustainable. How do they manage going on to solve the apparent secondary problem and leaving the root problem? Or is it advisable to just waive that root problem, especially because I like when you talked about the ikigai kind of something. You said there's an intersection between paraphrasing what's the person wants, that's the person implementing the project, and then the people receiving the impact at the receiving end. Now, when the people that are supposed to receive the impact feel the primary problem is the roots problem which you find in the course of implementing your project, how do you address it? If it's not clear, I'll give you a clear illustration using my project. So my project targets SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. To put it simple, we are just trying to see how we can reduce the burden of respiratory diseases that women who go to scavenge for rice at rice mill are exposed to. And we want to achieve this just by educating them, first of all, on the dangers of the exposure, and then also encouraging the use of personal protective equipment by we also want to actually empower them with some of these personal protective equipment, especially the sustainable ones, the ones that can reuse. However, we had explored the area before we designed this project, and we are just a team of about 10 medical students. However, on our visit yesterday, this visit is supposed to follow the actual rounding up of the target for the project. It's supposed to be a final survey. Our interaction with them showed that their main problem is hunger and poverty. And it seems like nothing will make sense to them unless, in fact, they were literally asking us for food as we came yesterday. What did we bring for them? So for them, the most important solution is actually food, which is almost like SDG 1. We do not have the capacity. There are over 500 women. We do not have the capacity to reach them. I mean, getting face masks is simpler, educating them is simpler. But then they feel this is the most important solution, and we do not have the capacity to do that. So do we now go to seek solution to that one, or how do we proceed and still see that we make an impact with this one we have designed ahead of time? I don't know if you understood, but if you need further clarification, you can let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hyacinth. Rayan, is it okay if I jump in with a response?
Of course, go ahead, Camille.
Okay, great. First off, Hyacinth, I just want to give you enormous kudos for one, putting some of these lessons that we've been talking about in practice, translating your mission simply and very beautifully for all of us. Two, for the work that you're doing, which not only seems like you are working on the intervention itself, but you are building a multifaceted and multidimensional understanding of the problem. And working on climate specifically, it is so fundamental to understand for many of the problems that you each are running towards that, and something that you've done clearly very beautifully in your work, is that these problems are intersecting with multiple other issues. And many of the other problems that other folks in your community, other fellows are facing, they likely have some intersections with the problems that you're solving for. And I hear in your voice this tension of, what is the best, most impactful thing that I can do for this community now, unveiling the root cause of this issue? I think that there is an importance of, I'll bring back to Ikigai here, the internal reflection of Hyacinth, what it is that you feel like you bring to this issue and the skills that you think can best apply to making the impact that you'd like to see. And it's okay as individual practitioners of social impact to say, I might be really well suited to solve this one problem. I am way out of my wheelhouse on this other. I don't really understand how to make this impact. And my university training and the fellowship, I haven't yet focused on understanding how to deliver impact in that way. That is when the power of we, I think, is really important. And Hyacinth, where maybe I'd encourage you to reach out to other leaders on your university campus or out in your community too, that might be working on the problem from the angle that you're seeing, and just handing them the validating data that, hey, the problem I'm working on is exacerbated by the issue that I see you working on each day. How can we share some of our practices to make sure that the different solutions we're developing are attacking the problem from a variety of different angles? And then the last thing I will say, and I hear it in your voice too, which is, it's honestly, I feel it so deeply because many of these issues, it's so difficult to see them exacerbated by so many different things, is remember that at the end of the day, you are doing and bringing the fullest of yourself to this. And it is hard to say, I can't solve everything. But as a social impact leader, it's important to say that to yourself and remind yourself that it's okay that you can't solve every problem. It is when the power of the collective is really the most important. When you're feeling the most vulnerable about your own skill set, I've found that that's when the community has been the biggest source of inspiration, and also of an omission that, we can't solve these problems alone. We're going to have to work together to figure out the many different ways we might achieve the same type of impact. So a very, very incomplete answer to this problem. If you continue to see it, feel free to reach out as you are really running at something that is so fundamental to so many of the projects that folks throughout the fellowship are experiencing, and that even I experienced during my time as a fellow.
Thank you so much, Camille. That was inspiring and coming again for the simple things that we can do to make real impact and to create our projects in a good way. Do Richard want to add anything?
I'll just be really brief because I know we're running up on time here, and if we want to squeeze in one more question. So the only thing I'll add with this is for everyone here, it's super important to think about, like, you guys are trying to tackle really tricky issues, like extremely tough issues that even like governments tackle sometimes. So how do we as individuals make a dent in this? The answer is we have to figure out one thing we can be uniquely good at solving. So unpack that for the problem that you're really tackling, because you're all tackling really complex things that have multi-dimensional facets. Try to make it a single dimensional problem that you're really good at solving. All of the best social impact projects, all the best nonprofits in the world have actually solved something super simple, just really, really well. So instead of trying to tackle a gargantuan problem and doing it like sort of well, tackle one problem and do it extremely well.
Thank you, Richard, so much. We're running out of time, but I have a question that we must ask from Sita to both. She's asking, what advice would you give to current fellows who wish to transition from social impact work to roles in their respective professional files or industries? Who would like to answer that question from both of you, or I can maybe repeat the question?
Camille, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll take a pass on it. Gosh, it's such a good question. I would say Richard said something earlier that I think is really important, which is that, as you graduate, it can be hard to dream. It can be hard to remember the version of you that was so passionate about these issues. And so what I encourage you to do, though, is to find that internal compass. And then I really will say this with I truly, it might sound a little pedestrian, but tell everybody what it is that you care about, because the passion that you have for a problem is infectious. And I remember even in my job, my first job out of college, when I was not working in social impact, but I told everybody how much I cared about this issue, and activating a community of people around me who knew how much I cared about this led to so many different opportunities being brought to me. Your passion is infectious. It can be reflected back to you by people that also care, but maybe aren't doing that job right now. So tell everybody your story, why you care about that issue, and make sure that those individuals, whether they're mentors, their peers, their friends, their family members, make sure they know what it is that is your North Star. And I promise you that even if, you spend 5 to even 10 years not working on social impact, for however long you graduate after MCN and this fellowship program, these opportunities will find their way back to you. There's almost like a karmic cycle that the good that you put out in the world and the beliefs that you have will come back to you in some way. And I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah,
Thank
the only
you,
thing
Camille.
oh, sorry, Ryan.
No,
I was
go
just gonna
ahead.
add. So there's kind of two ways I like to think about this. The way to make this your kind of career after university is actually quite simple. Either you find a job that has social impact in it, or you start your own job. But the thing to realize when doing these two paths is you cannot follow the norm of what everyone else is doing around you, because when you do that, you'll go into things that are just not social impact and just like, frankly, I think rather boring occupations. Because that is the norm of what, and again, like, you guys are doing extraordinary things and are a 1 percentile of the global community here, and there's not really many people like you guys, but you have to make sure there remains to not be many people like you guys by not doing what everyone else is doing. So either do one of those two pathways. That's the best way out of college to actually continue your impact. And it's hard. Realize that it's extremely hard when finding a job in a social impact field. There's not a lot out there, and that's the reality. There's a lot of jobs by definition, boost the global economy, and a lot of those are not actually social impact driven. So don't lose faith when it gets very hard. Keep don't be complacent and just say, oh, I'm going to do this boring thing that doesn't have anything to do with my passions. No, don't do that. Do what has something to do with your passion, but know that it will be very, very, very hard to do that, but it's worth it once you get it.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you both, Richard and Camelia, for being with us today and give us those incredible insights and advice and tips and all. It was really a pleasure having you here with us today. If you would like, you can share in the comments in the chat with everyone here your links and contacts that fellows can contact with you and reach out for you. Also, I want to remind everyone about the upcoming Saturday Network and Upscaling Hour under the title of Telling Stories and Social Impact, happening this Saturday, October 5th, from 11 a.m. ET to 12 a.m. Eastern Time. So more information can be found in your inbox. So thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. And thank you, Richard and Camilla, for this amazing insights and for your stories. Hope to make you a model and be like you someday. All team Millennium Fellowship Class 2025. Thank you for attending today's webinar.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you
Do you
all.
have any last remarks, both? Any takeaways from today?
I would just say you guys are already like us. We're not all that special. All you have to do is keep doing what you're doing, and yeah, you'll be much better. So
I'm looking forward. Yes, to Rachel's point, we're looking forward to seeing you all totally outpace us, and so grateful to be a part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for being with us here today. And thank you all. We reached the final of our webinar for the day. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Have a good one.